Welcome to the annual SOMSI Symposium. This is the 5th anniversary of the program, which is, I think, really neat. I'm very proud that Chae is the intern this year to commemorate this 5th year because she really has an incredible argument and ideas to share with you all. You should know that she worked really hard this term, both at Hillstead and at Westover, researching Degas and de Kooning, draft after draft with me, very nicely with a smile on her face. I think it really reflects the kind of art historian that Chae is bound to be. She has a very academic and intellectual and deep mind, and I think that you'll have a treat tonight hearing her argument from her. So without further ado, Chae will introduce her exhibition.
Thank you so much for coming again. I know the weather is really nasty outside, but thank you so much. First of all, I'd like to thank the following people for making this experience possible. Tortoliero family for funding this, and Eastman's for donating the de Kooning pits and also talking with me about the work. Hillstead Museum, Melanie Anderson-Bourbeau, who's the curator of the museum and who worked with me through the internship, and Westover's Muffy Green, Giselle, and Tom Burns and Ben Hildebrand. Thank you. So, as the 5th intern of the SOMSI program, I went to the Hillstead Museum every Wednesdays and Sundays and helped them with various things. So I helped them in public affairs like farmers market, which they held every Sunday, and I also helped at a dinner they held at the museum. I also cataloged the farm tools as gift collections at the museum, and I also I also helped the curator move objects in and out of a newly renovated room, so that was really cool because I could touch the actual things. Yeah, I felt special. So as an intern, I'm responsible for 2 projects. One's Hillstead Museum and Westover School Connections project, which is my exhibition up here, and the other one is the Museum Studies project, which I'll be presenting to you shortly. And for my exhibition, I knew I wanted to do something with Degas and his ballerinas, but I couldn't find a good connection in the beginning with our school and Degas. But then I rediscovered this amazing de Kooning print, and there were surprisingly many connections I could make with Degas. And so initially, I was going to research the provenances of these works, and I was successful with tracing where this print came from. Because I did an interview with the alum and the donor of this work, Jody Eastman, and her husband, John Eastman's father, was the lawyer for de Kooning, so they directly purchased this piece from the artist, which was mind-blowing. And so I was successful with this, figuring out where this came from, but for Degas prints, which are, these are actually 2 prints from his 20 other drawing portfolios. So the problem was that the museum has no idea how Mr. Pope purchased these prints. So I sent emails to the Frick Museum in Boston, and I also talked to the New York Arts Consortium, but they didn't have any record of where or how Mr. Pope purchased it. So it's kind of, I never really found out how that happened. But the museum supposes that the publisher, that Mr. Pope was on a client list for a gallery that he frequented called Guppy and CA, and the publisher of the portfolio named Michael Manzi was the one who succeeded the gallery. So Michael Manzi probably saw Mr. Pope's name on the client list and said, "There's a new Degas portfolio, would you like to purchase it?" But that's a supposition that the museum made. So in the process of researching the provenances, I found much more about these 2 works, and my argument in my exhibition is that both artists capture an essence of their ages in their works. Degas through this idea of gaze, and de Kooning through this idea of a glimpse. So I will talk much more about Degas in my symposium paper shortly, but I will tell you that his idea of modernity was defined by a contemporary French critic named Charles Baudelaire. And Degas explores this idea of modernity through fragmentation, which you can see in these like truncated limbs, and also in the hatch marks that kind of cut this girl off, and also the grid here. So, and Degas also uses this like reproductions through heliography, which is it's like a photo thing that like you have to use chemicals, and then it's like basically the earliest form of photography. And so he uses all this to show his idea of modernity, and I will talk about it much more extensively shortly. So for de Kooning, also captures an essence, but he doesn't capture his the essence of his time, but he captures this essence of woman, which he defined as quote the idol, Venus, and nude, end quote. And because he believed that, quote, even the abstract shapes must have a likeness, end quote, he often left remnants of his subjects in his works. So if you see in his earlier works, like Woman 1 here and painting, you can see the recognizable form of a woman here. And also in the like curving forms here, you can like guess that these forms imply like woman's breasts or like other body parts. But in his later works, like one of the lithography he explored in 1970s, he captured this essence of woman through lines rather than like forms. So as you can see, there's this really like more nebulous, softer lines up here, and then it conflicts with stronger angular lines, and also this softer patch of area is curtailed by this really like jagged angular lines here, and all these lines and conflicts come together to form this kind of burst of energy, and it also creates this like raw tension. And through this tension, de Kooning was implying what he thought was essence of woman, like universal woman, so all of us here. Both de Kooning and Degas captured some kind of essence, and as my title implies, they explored their essence through fragmentation and form. And so at this point, if you have any questions, I would love to answer them, but it would be great if you could hold them till the end of my symposium paper presentation. And my exhibition will be up till winter.
Alumni weekend.
Yeah, or it's possibly spring, so you should all come back and read my labels and look at the works. And yeah, thank you so much for coming. Seriously, I'm so moved. At this point, we can walk to the Red Hall, and I will present you with my symposium paper. Thank you. Andre Valerio, contemporary art critic and connoisseur of Degas, noted that Degas' portfolio revealed his entire development as an artist through his studies of draperies, jockeys, and dancers to reach what he called Degas' quote, final triumph in the female nudes, end quote, or bathers. The sketches, however, are not merely evidence of Degas' development as an artist, nor the bathers necessarily Degas' quote, final triumph, end quote. Instead of a chronological catalog of the artist's artistic achievements, the series, and in particular the drawings of ballerinas like dancer as seen on the left, dancers here, and from 1880, and study of legs and arms here from 1882, reveal in their subjects, mediums, and compositions Degas' modernity. All his dancer drawings contain either explicit hatch marks, remnants of a grid, or signs of fragmentation. By using tactile mediums like graphite, charcoal, and pastel, and by fragmenting his figures, The artist evokes the sensation of touch in his viewers as they actively gaze at his figures. The sensation of touch, the desire for sexuality, which for Degas captures a glance of his time, is further augmented when the artist disseminates his drawings through heliography and thus turns his works into commodities, objects of desire. Therefore, in a focused study of the dancers in Degas' Bande de Sang, Degas explores his sense of modernity through his subjects, composition, form, and the medium of the print itself. Degas' sense of modernity is seen most accurately in the subject of ballerinas and theater. In the 19th century, modernity could be defined by Charles Baudelaire, a French poet and critic who, in his 1864 essay, The Painter of Modern Life, established modernity as, quote, the ephemeral, the fugitive, the contingent, the half of earth whose other half is the eternal and the immutable, end quote. Baudelaire further stated that to become a truly modern artist, one must, quote, distill the eternal from the transitory, end quote, and thus capture, quote, everything from costume and cover down to gesture, glance and smile, for each age has a deportment, a glance and a smile of its own, end quote. A modern artist has to seek after a unique character of his era, find ways to extract that trait from his rapidly changing age, and then transfix it permanently onto his canvas by experimenting with his subjects, mediums, and compositions. In order to find the true essence of his era, it was essential for an artist to first become a keen observer of his society. A modern artist had to be a flaneur, a dandy stroller of 19th century France who, as Robert Herbert says, quote, reconnoiters city streets and stores up his observations for eventual use, end quote. Not observations clouded by emotions, but, quote, detached analytical observations, end quote. One of the best ways to observe Paris at the time was at the opera, where performances like ballet could be easily studied. Ballet was a, quote, particular form of commercialized entertainment that allowed the artist to observe both the dancers on the stage and the spectators watching the performances, end quote. With the occurrence of Haussmannization in the 1850s, the streets of Paris were widened, boulevards were established, and residential quarters were renovated, leading to an increase in spaces for public viewing. As Edward King, an American author, said upon his visit to Paris in 1867 at the newly renovated places, quote, the aristocrat comes to lounge and the strangers to gaze, end quote. The construction of opera theaters and cafes also caused some advent of, quote, commercialized entertainment, end quote, like music and ballet concerts that provided even more opportunities for Parisians to see and be seen. In particular, Paris Opera, with its balcony lodges and boxes, was constructed to give opportunities for people to, as Herbert says, quote, see who was with whom, what the latest fashions were, and how those in the lodges received the performances, end quote. Many Impressionists besides Degas also explored this active gazing at the opera, like Mary Cassatt, Degas' contemporary artist, who captured the gazes of the audience in works like Woman in Black at Opera from 1879, where the woman attentively watches the performance as the man in the background gazes at her. In this manner, the opera was a suitable location for Degas and his contemporaries to observe this dynamic looking. This active looking experience of the ballet during the time of Haussmannization became a desirable one as the double status of the ballerinas as both performers and prostitutes became more explicit. From the beginning, the ballet performance's role as a form of, quote, commercialized entertainment, end quote, and its role as a spectacle, something to be watched, developed the idea of the desired gaze. Because in the ballet world, as Eunice Lipton says, quote, the dancers were obviously coveted and sexually available, end quote. In the arena of performances, the dancers' bodies were as much on display as the dance itself. This desirable gaze of the male viewer was acknowledged even at the time. As Hippolyte Taine, a French critic and historian, commented, the Persian opera was a, quote, market for girls, end quote, in which, quote, the audience is made up of 3/4 of mere pleasure seekers, end quote.
These pleasure seekers, often wealthy men, quote, who treated the ballet dancers as a kind of game preserve, end quote, would even further venture onto the backstage of the opera to gain a better view of the popular dancers, as seen in Degas' The Curtain from 1880. Because the Parisians were well aware of the double status of the ballerinas as both performers and prostitutes, the opera became a place to satisfy a desire through gazing, as Herbert says, at the, quote, nauseous voluptuousness, end quote, of the dancers. Therefore, for Degas, the dancers' bodies displayed at the opera acted as models to extract the idea of desire from what he saw as one essence of his age. As Degas explored the dancer's body as an object of the gaze and the opera as a location of that dynamic looking, he sought to capture this gaze through the idea of fragmentation in his compositions. Degas often deconstructed his figures by cropping them out of the frames of his work or by literally displaying the truncated limbs of the dancers. In his painting, like Orchestra at the Opera on the left from 1870, and in his pastel work at the ballet, Woman with a Fan on the right from 1883, all the dancers' torsos are curtailed by the top frame of the works, and thus only a series of legs are visible under the upper frame. In his Van de Sang, the fragmented limbs of the ballerinas become more explicit in his sketches, as in Dancer, Pavements in second position, where the grid, at once a device to aid in proportional relationships of the female form, also deconstructs the figure. The vertical and horizontal grid lines pierce through the dancer, breaking the dancer's figure into multiple squares. In his other drawings, like Study of Legs and Arm Movements for a dancer with tambourine, Degas explicitly displays several close-up views of cut-off limbs in the same position. This resonance of the dancer's body, the isolated limbs, respond to a visual culture of imagery that transformed the dancer's body into a fetish. Reflecting a culture fetish, montages of ballerina limbs, in particular the ankle, were popular at the time as pornographic images as seen here. Drawing of the fetish from such commercialized imagery, Degas implies the sexual connotations of the dancer's commodified body. The limbs are so mechanically repeated that they seem almost interchangeable with the limbs of any dancer, transforming her into a commercialized doll that can be easily manipulated. Therefore, in visually deconstructing the dancer's body in response to cultural imagery, Degas' works, quote, distill, end quote, a particular glance, quote, from his transitory, end quote, age. As Degas reflected the cultural imagery of his time through fragmentation, he also used his medium, pastel's subordinate status, its rawness in revealing surface texture, and its ambiguity to represent his age. In the 19th century, pastel was considered a lesser medium in the hierarchy of artistic forms. Especially at the time, pastel was looked down upon as an excess of Rococo art and the ancien régime. Only in the 1850s did pastel gain brief popularity as a symbol of aristocratic luxury, but it was still considered an auxiliary medium. In addition, unlike oil paint, pastel left too many signs of labor in the works. Because in the 19th century French salon, quote, all evidence of labor in painting had to be effaced, end quote, oil paint that hid the artist's touch was considered far more refined than pastel, which left obvious signs of the artist's process. In addition, oil paint was associated with masculinity because of its role as a traditional medium used for the highest form of art, history paintings, and its bold grandeur. Pastel, on the other hand, as used by Degas in his sketch of ballerina with tambourine, was often characterized by feminine frivolity, fragility, and temporariness because of its nature to be reworked easily and its soft lines. Degas, however, repeatedly used pastel in his works as seen here in Study of Legs and Arm Movements for a Dancer with Tambourine. He was mainly attracted by its nature to remain unfixed, always able to be modified, even by a slightest smudge, unlike oil paints that cannot be fixed without disturbing the work. For Degas, who often returned to his works to strengthen his contour and to add more layers of color, pastel was an adaptable medium, one as transient as the modern age he sought to capture. The artist was also attracted to pastel because of its ambiguous method of expressing surface texture. While pastel's frivolity softens the figural form, making it seem unfocused, the overtly hatched marks explicitly reveal each line of the artist's touch. Therefore, even though pastel was considered to be a subordinate medium, Degas was drawn to it because of its rawness, apparent surface texture, and ambiguity in being both unfocused and direct that enabled him to capture through these tactile mediums the desirable bodies of the dancers. With this palpable medium of pastel, Degas focused on the idea of touch and then further explored the idea by incorporating tactile mediums other than pastel, such as charcoal, graphite, and chalk in his works to create hatch marks. Then, Sir Bateman's inside composition, as shown here from 1880, reveals explicitly the hatch marks of his medium, charcoal. While diagonal hatch marks both shade and define the dancer's torso and almost transparent tutu, they also fragment the figure by deconstructing her form into a series of flat, parallel lines of pastel. Furthermore, in deconstructing his figure with his marks, Degas makes it necessary for his viewers to recombine each broken pieces to form a whole in order for them to reconstruct the figure. As Louis Blanc, a 19th century French historian, commented, Degas' works, quote, with the eye close to the canvas, one would think it haphazard collection of broad, thick hatchings dragged by lights, end quote. Though Blanc attributes this piecemeal collection of marks to the artist's process of working, the disintegration of form into a reiteration of such, quote, thick hatchings, end quote, rendered the female form incomplete and unmade. In unmasking the body, the rough lines of pastel, charcoal, and graphite and chalk further, quote, catch, end quote, the viewer's gazes and trace every bumps of raw lines that compose Degas' figures. In this active gazing, an attempt to identify the figure as a whole, the viewers come to touch the figure with their eyes. Therefore, by fragmenting his figures with rough hatch marks, Degas forces his viewers to synthesize the fragments through active gazing and thus causes them to touch the dancers through their desirable gaze. In this illusion of hatch marks, Degas captures the lustful gazes of the audiences at the 19th century Paris Opera once more. Degas further augments the idea of the desirable gaze through his reproduction of the sketches in heliographic reproductions. By disseminating the prints, Degas not only increased opportunities for his viewers to touch his figures through their desirable gaze, but also reduced his dancers into objects of easily affordable commodities. With the advent of fervent advertising in 19th century Paris, the idea of commodity was especially heightened. Numerous business advocated their trades by hanging their advertisements, often an image of a glimpse, a part of the product, outside their stores. In a similar manner, the reproduction of his sketches through heliography acted as a type of advertisement for the artists of the dancers' double status as both entertainers and prostitutes. Therefore, by disseminating the heliographic images like commercial brochures, Degas further develops the idea of the desirable gaze, reflecting his society's tendency to secretly view the ballerinas as prostitutes, objects of want. Thus, by understanding Degas' figures which are disseminated through heliography as a fetish, Degas' bon dessin reveals his sense of modernity. Therefore, the series should not be viewed as a mere catalogue of his development or his source of income. The sketches perhaps reveal more than what his finished paintings display. The dancers' bodies are first desired on the stage, then unmade by Degas in his drawings through his fragmented compositions and hatch marks of tactile mediums, and then finally desired again by the viewers who touch the figures with their gazes. In uniting the gaze and touch, Degas makes palpable the quote, glance end quote, of his time. This glimpse of his age is only underscored when the sketches of the dancers are examined in the context of the entire portfolio, in particular with the repeated form of the jockeys and the awkward poses of the bathers. Degas explores the idea of fragmentation and repetition of images not only through his sketches of the dancers, but also through his drawings of common people whose lives in Degas' mind capture the, quote, gesture, glance, and smile, end quote, of his age. In this manner, Degas' drawing portfolio does not, as his contemporary says, achieve a, quote, final triumph in the female nudes, end quote, or bathers, but does so by demonstrating Degas' modernity through subject matter and form that remains consistent throughout the series. Thank you so much for coming. At this time, I'd like to accept any questions you have about my exhibition or my paper. So, any questions?
What interested you the most about Degas' drawings?
That's an interesting question. Well, so ever since I was really young, I traveled a lot, and when I went to Musée d'Orsay in Paris when I was in second grade, I don't know, Degas' ballerinas, they were just so pretty, because I was young then, so I was like, oh, so pretty. And then I learned more about Degas, and I took more classes here at Westover, and then my favorite period of art in all art history is 19th century French Impressionism, so I figured Degas is a good artist for that, so I chose him to study for my internship. Any other questions? Wow, you guys are so well informed. Okay, thank you again for coming.
I just want to say thanks to Chae and present her with her certificate for completing the entrance.